Actually, just if one of your viewers would, even if there's suffering going on, and a situation that seems intractable, like no matter what that person does, it just refuses to come right. There's instruction there. You're participating in that. You're informing that with your belief system. And so, one good place to start, and always, always, the first step is to take a breath, step back, and be still. Just allow some stillness, allow some spaciousness. So you're not just sort of mentally working on it all the time, and sort of hitting it with a hammer to see where it'll break. But that, after being still, then the really good next step would be to ask, is there some truth I haven't told here, or some truth I haven't acknowledged here? In the case of codependent transactions, probably one of the best questions that you can ask if you find, you're in a relationship that's, just relentlessly distressing and, refuses to sort of work. One really excellent question, especially if you're considering some action like helping, in quotes, to ask, is this mine? Not is it true, is it false, is it good, is it bad, is it right, is it wrong? All of which tends to send us up into the mind, that kind of question. But is it mine? Is this mine to do? And very often, because we know the truth very often, and we just know it, we possess that knowledge and forgetfulness, as Socrates says. And if we just ask the right question, is this mine? Very often we do know that it really isn't. And then it's just a question of whether you're going to honor and live up to what you know. I mean, you can know that and just sort of go charging in anyway to help and rescue and save somebody else, none of which is anybody's role or place or business. But just to start with that question, is this mine? If you're considering an action, to sort of help, there's that word again, help save somebody else or fix a situation or make things better, and when it's been relentlessly sort of troubling and disturbing, you can just ask, is this mine? And very often clients, especially on the call, like if it's couples counseling, you ask that question, and there's really, I mean, the information is readily available. It's very obvious to one of the other, partners in the session that he or she's been trying to do something that belonged to the other person, that was rightly the other person's diligence. So, is there some truth I haven't told? Is this mine? There are other questions you can ask, kind of core questions you can ask. Is there something that I've left unsaid? That's a good one. And that may be a place where people can start. I wouldn't assume that if there's suffering going on, it's because of a conflict with a life principle. There are other ways that contradiction gets into the belief system than that. So that's one place we look, but we also look at other things.
Where are the other places that you look?
Well, for example, is the person saying yes when it's no, or no when it's yes? I mean, that's to be in conflict with your own truth, your own sort of interior reality, and to show up in that kind of conflicted state where you're feeling one thing but saying another, or you believe one thing but what you're saying contradicts it. If you're in that sort of self-combat, then that's not going to go well, and that's going to produce suffering. So we listen for cues. Socratic listening, which is really kind of the method, is very subtle, and we listen for innuendo. We listen for the timing, like the pacing of how something is said. Is it said too fast? Is the client kind of jamming the signal of a question? Because if that's happening, it usually means it's the right question, right? We're listening for double entendres. We're listening for between the lines, kind of to hear what's going on, in the subtler and sometimes subterranean areas of the belief system. It's not always witting. Sometimes the beliefs are unwitting, and the assumptions. And so we're listening for these like tells, or indicators that there's something going on there that wants to be scrutinized and examined more closely. And then we kind of drill there, and that's where we put our attention, and we see what's going on there. I mean, I've had some amazing experiences with clients who came in to the session, made some offhand remark, like at the beginning of the session, that actually gave away the whole session. Just an opening remark, that, and usually in jest. Usually it's made, kind of to break the ice. And sometimes there's some tension, stress around any kind of counseling session, I imagine. And so people come in and they'll say something that sounds like it's irrelevant, but the counselor's always listening. And it's often been the case that a statement like that, just an offhanded, comment made in jest at the beginning, actually kind of telegraphs and anticipates the direction that the session ends up taking. So we're listening for a lot of things, that are going on in the client's belief system, a conflict with values, not just other beliefs that are non-controversial, but client's values. We're listening for like wounded expectations, life script imperatives, things that are running that the client in which the client might be so immersed that there's no conscious awareness that that's going on. So it's important sometimes to bring that stuff out of the shadows, look it in the eye, see it for what it is, and really scrutinize it, see if it has any credentials. If it's a contradiction or a false belief, it will have no credentials. That's another way of saying that it doesn't have the truth under it. So it won't hold up under Socratic scrutiny. And the minute the belief doesn't hold up, the minute that you bring it out and expose it as a false belief or a contradiction, the experience the client has in session is that for that moment, that belief is not convincing. It loses its credibility for a moment. And that's all you need, is that moment to identify what a better choice would be. And a better choice is, of course, by the client's own standard. It's not something that the counselor imposes.
Could you give a brief example of one of your favorite times when someone made an offhanded remark that ended up being crucial for the session?
Well, yeah, I mean, there have been a lot of them, but there was one fellow who, it was a couples session, and he had come to the session kind of reluctantly to please his wife, which is not always the greatest way to go into a session. I mean, ideally you want people who are really committed to the process, self-examination of beliefs, self-work, and willingness to take responsibility and make better choices and all that. And so he got on the call, and the first thing he said was, what was it? Something like, well, I knew I'd either bring my drugs or my gun to the session. This guy was like a Texan. And he said, I knew I should brought either my drugs or my gun to the session. And it turned out that what was going on in the marriage was that this guy was in a false dilemma that he had to either be numb or violent. So those are the two ways to handle a problem. And he kind of telegraphed that at the very beginning of the session. So sometimes I just sit back and it just sort of shows up like that. So that was one. There was another where a young woman who wanted to be in a romantic relationship, it just like nothing she did was working. I mean, it was like conspicuously not happening in her life. And it's not like she wasn't trying, right? So she got on the call, and the first thing she said was, let me just tell you this up front. So already she's got my attention because I know that whatever she's going to say is going to be important for the session. She said, I would rather never be in another relationship than be in another bad one. So she's showing me her belief system, right? She's in this false dilemma that those are her two choices. And it's very much in the nature of contradictions to set up as false dilemmas in the belief system. That what they do is they screen out a better third choice. And as long as the person is immersed in that false dilemma, it becomes a matter of the lesser of two evils. If for her, not being in a relationship was a better choice, given that the only other choice was to be in another bad relationship. So I just asked her, is there a third option here? That's all it took to kind of move us in the right direction. And then she realized that she could kind of hear herself, and she realized that she had kind of locked herself into this false dilemma that either way she went on that, she would suffer. You'd either be lonely or be abused. These are your two choices. So you pick the one that's the lesser of the two evils, but it's a lousy deal. I mean, you lose either way. And that's despite the fact that there's a payoff operating there that's completely understandable, right? it's better to be alone than to be abused. Yeah, I mean, if those are the only two choices, then I'll pick alone every day of the week. So it's not like what she was doing was not understandable. What needed to be questioned was whether or not those were her only two options. And her belief system had it wired that that's all she could see. It's one or the other. So pick the one that you can live with.